Okay, next we have a briefing on the residential speed camera program. Hooray, we are finally working on this, getting it up and running. So we have Mr. Battle. Could you please give us an orientation?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. So since the council passed the legislation authorizing the residential photo enforcement program in late 2021, we had a public hearing in the spring of 2022 related to potential sites for cameras, and we have since then filled all of the appointed seats on our Citizens Advisory Committee to provide input on potential sites, and they had their first meeting on February 8th, and we have put in a request to have a briefing for the committee on the status of the program itself, and we are pleased to be joined by Mr. Captain Jason Smith from the Police Department. Also, the Deputy Chief Gomez is here, and they have other members of the team here. So what we can do, Mr. Chair, is invite Captain Smith, Deputy Chief Gomez, or whoever else wants to be
Great.
at the table. And so, ma'am, we put you here. We have a PowerPoint presentation for you. And we're going to give Captain Smith the opportunity to run it.
Great. Thank you. Welcome.
So now, if you just press, I think it's down to advance. Do it. Is that it?
Yep, we're good.
Okay. Yep, and you hit your button in this one.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, and good morning, council members. My name is Captain Jason Smith. I work for the Prince George's County Police Department's Bureau of Homeland Security. As part of my responsibilities, I oversee the Automated Enforcement Division. To my right is my boss, Deputy Chief Tina Gomez. We were asked to prepare a briefing for the committee on the status of the residential enforcement program. I have a brief presentation here. Just to go through or to hit on the high points, I want to first bring the committee up to date on the current status of residential speed enforcement. Then touch on the status of our vendor transition. We're in the process of transitioning our automated enforcement vendor and how that impacted the residential program. Do a brief review of how sites are selected, and then of course take any questions that you may have. This is a general timeline of, because obviously the question is this law it took effect in December of 2021. Here we are in 2024, and we haven't seen a broad implementation of residential speed enforcement across the county, certainly at the pace any of us would have wished. So I prepared a general timeline on the sequence of events that led us to where we are now. Obviously, in December 2021, the residential speed enforcement law took effect. We began working to identify some initial areas that would be good candidates for residential enforcement. 9 initial corridors, because the law does require us to publish in a newspaper record and on our website any enforcement corridors we plan to potentially do enforcement in. We published those 9, and then throughout the spring and summer of 2022, we were lucky in the sense that when the law passed, DPW&T had already been working on a comprehensive traffic study on the Ritchie-Marlboro Road corridor, and that study allowed us to very quickly deploy 2 cameras into that zone because we were armed with the data necessary to establish that it would have been a good enforcement tool. So in the early summer of 2022, we did deploy our first 2 residential speed enforcement cameras into an enforcement zone along Ritchie-Marlboro Road. And again, there's some flexibility in the timeline here because there aren't hard dates. Pretty much the general story is throughout 2022, especially in the context of implementing our residential enforcement and reviewing our enforcement of the Maryland Route 210 cameras, we started to learn that our vendor at that time that we had contracted with to provide automated speed enforcement, we started to determine that they were not going to be able to handle residential speed enforcement for a variety of factors. the initial months of 2022, we spent trying to, identify our issues, work with the vendor, see if we can get these resolved, and proceed with residential enforcement. But as we dug deeper into these issues, it got to a point pretty much in mid-2022, we felt strongly that we were not going to be able to do residential speed with that current vendor, and that our entire priority should shift to transitioning vendors as quickly as possible to one that would be able to handle a program. So again, that's pretty much late summer, fall 2022. Those issues started to really rear their heads. The late half of 2022, we pretty much were left with, we have to switch vendors. That's the only path forward here. We began that process. As you know, I'm sure, the council members are familiar, as way more than I am. Contract procurement in the county is a time-consuming process. We began that in late 2022, early 2023, identifying vendors, trying to find one that would suit our needs the best. That process, we were able finally in January 18th of this year, select and sign a contract with a new speed enforcement vendor. And that was all of our work during late 2022 and 2023, was to facilitate that transition. So we have a new vendor signed. We are in the process of onboarding that vendor while simultaneously phasing out the outgoing vendor. So the current status of our program is we do have a new vendor. We have confidence that this new vendor will be able to facilitate expanding the program dramatically, including a broad transition from most of our speed cameras now are still school zone cameras, which as you may know, those cameras are limited in hours of operation. They can only run from 8 to 6 during weekdays. And obviously switching that to a residential enforcement, that camera now has to run 24 hours a day. So obviously that impacts the equipment, the support infrastructure that backs it. Again, part of why we felt that our outgoing vendor was not going to be able to handle this. It's a dramatic change in the style of enforcement. So we are currently onboarding the new vendor. That contract was signed on the 18th. On the 26th of February, that's the cutoff date for the old vendor. Their contract expires. A contractual 6-month run-out period will begin with that vendor. During that run-out period, obviously the old vendor will remove their equipment. All of the citations that are currently in process that were issued prior to the 26th, those have to be addressed either by transitioning to the new vendor for remedy, or transitioning to MVA flagging, collections, that kind of thing. So it is a process. The contract allows a 6-month period and there are certain key dates during that 6 months where we wind up operations with the old vendor and concurrently run up the new vendor. So keep going the wrong way. Yeah, again, these details. Current contract expires. 6-month run-out period. They'll stop issuing citations, remove their current equipment, work with the ongoing vendor to transition citations in process, and simultaneously, we are currently in the process of onboarding the new vendor. Our goal, and this is ambitious because with all of these projects, there's always something that comes out of left field to slow you down. But our plan is to have new cameras with this new vendor in place within 90 days of the contract being signed. That was on January the 18th. The holdup for that, or the thing that's going to come out of left field most likely, is these are turnkey programs, which means the vendor contract obligates the vendor to support the entire program. They lease the equipment to us. They maintain the equipment. They maintain a software backend that allows citations to be reviewed, approved by the officer. They're responsible for mailing to violators. They're responsible for scheduling with courts. And this is a standard, these style programs are standard throughout the state. A lot of them run this way. But obviously that requires the new vendor to provision their software support infrastructure to be able to handle that. We have to put them in touch with our court representatives and with the MVA and et cetera. They're professionals. They've done this before, but that's going to be the thing that holds us up, if anything. It's not a matter of equipment. They've assured us they can have 50 new cameras available for us to deploy within a few months. But what's likely to happen is that we'll have the cameras, but not the support infrastructure in place. But either way, 90 days is our current goal. Okay. So hopefully that gives you a brief overview of the current status of the program. The next few slides are just a brief overview of the general process by which sites are identified, selected for enforcement. It's crucial to remember that when we place these cameras, we have to have good data to back up that not only automated enforcement is going to be an effective tool there, but it's a better or more effective tool than potentially some other tools DPW&T might have at their exposure or their available to them, other traffic calming devices, re-engineering the roadway. So again, that's why they're a partner with us in this program. When a complaint comes through or a concern over a particular roadway comes through, we work in partnership with them to conduct traffic studies to identify whether automated speed enforcement is a good candidate for helping calm that roadway. Those sites are identified through a variety of means. Obviously, the police department maintains pretty robust data sets on our crash and citation that we issued. We are accepting requests from the public, obviously. Traditionally, those have come through the council members. I'm sure many of you have forwarded one to me. We maintain a running list of those. Luckily, with the new Citizen Advisory Committee officially up and running, we anticipate that will be a major source of our requests from the public. And then, of course, recommendations from our partner agencies, including DPW&T and the State Highway Administration. So we'll get recommendations for sites from them. There we'll begin a process where they're analyzed and prioritized. That can be time-consuming because it does involve like traffic surveying equipment being deployed to count traffic volume, that kind of thing. And again, this is something that we work closely with DPW&T to get through. So we'll determine whether, first off, if there's a solid data-based justification for it, and then based on the sites that we're examining, trying to establish a priority to say, okay, we think these are the ones that we need to target first. Once that happens, we request approval. Those approvals would start with me, potentially as the commander of automated enforcement, submitting a request to the chief of police. The sites are approved and selected by, and the site is a little misleading, the approval process and the prioritization process, sites are ultimately selected by the chief of police in partnership with the director of DPW&T and the county council. Though those groups will be where these sites are ultimately authorized for that enforcement. Once a site is approved, it has to be prepared for enforcement. That includes a public notice, has to be published in a newspaper of record and on our public website. The Department of Public Works has to install the signage required by the law, and that can take time. And then the contractor has to work with DPW&T or the SHA, depending on who owns the roadway, to obtain the required permits to install and calibrate the devices. Once the device is up and running, it can only issue warnings. There's a period where it can only issue warnings. We run 30 days where only warnings are sent out, and after that 30-day period, active enforcement begins. We do publish currently an interactive web map on the county's website that shows the locations of all of our current automated enforcement corridors. It's a big part of our push to, I know a lot of us know the public's perception of these programs can be a little atavistic. It's a money grab. It's not. We are fully transparent. We're not trying to trick anybody. You can know exactly where our cameras are. If knowing where our cameras are means that you slow down on the roads, that's exactly working as intended. That's our goal. But we do publish and maintain an interactive web map of our current corridors. Just a point I'll touch on. We can establish a corridor, but that doesn't obligate us to do active enforcement in it. In long term, because the residential law is such a powerful tool, our goal should be to establish as enforceable zones every qualifying roadway within the county. And then that doesn't mean we'll be enforcing 400 locations at one time, but that means we'll have an option and we can move cameras in and out strategically as they start to have an effect on traffic. So we can establish zones and should establish zones. Once they're established, we can enforce. We can turn off and on enforcement. We can move a camera into and out. So ideally, there will always be more zones than we have active cameras. That's the end of my presentation. Certainly, if you have any.
Yes, thank you. Vice Chair Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Captain, for the presentation. My question is about the process to select the vendor. just for informational purposes, is the vendor a local county-based business?
The one we signed with is not local, no, sir.
If you don't mind me asking, where's the company from?
The company that we signed a contract with, they're international. They do enforcement throughout the states. I don't know off the top of my head where they would call their main office, but it's a company that is international.
How long is the contract for the vendor?
I believe it's standard 3-year with 2 1-year extensions. That tends to be our boilerplate, but I'd have to look specifically. It's somewhere along there.
And to any reasoning why we went with an international company as opposed to a local county business company that pretty much knows our county?
We of the companies we looked for, our determination was that for the technology that was available and the pricing, the potential additional features that could be provided, that this was a better value for the county, the company that we chose.
Is there any way this committee can get information on the company that you selected?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Denoga.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Couple of things. I wish we had the presentation a year or two ago. My office has been pounding the police department asking why the camera system is not up and running, and we never got this answer, which is, well, recently we got this answer. But I've been having people scream at me, or more appropriately, my staff have been getting screamed at, particularly at the people out on Briggs Cheney Road. Mm-hmm. So that is what it is, but this explanation would have been nice a year ago. Putting that aside, the county executive requested that we agree to a list of sites, as you know, on March 1st of 2022. And we held a public hearing on April 12th of 2022 to discuss we already approved the legislation in 21. We had a public hearing, I think, regarding the sites and just the overall program on April 12th of 22. So I believe that was the mechanism the council used to sign off on the sites. Mm-hmm. I could be wrong, and maybe Mr. Battle will remember.
No, that's correct. To meet the requirement, yes.
Okay, so I don't know what we're thinking. The PowerPoint as it's drafted is not totally accurate. I think we agree on that. The council needs to be included in the decision-making process. We agree on that.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So I think the April 12th, 2022 hearing was how the council opined that it agreed with the list. So I think that's what happened. Mm-hmm. So we need to get the list when you have it so we can sign off on it. Mm-hmm. I would think that a starting point is the list that you already have. Mm-hmm. Now maybe things have changed in 2 years, but I can assure you on Briggs Cheney Road there's just been more accidents, more people's mm-hmm. yards have been run over. I would urge, I've been telling this people for 6 years we're getting them cameras. I'm running out of time.
Yes, sir.
So I hope they still qualify.
They do, and it is on that a few slides ago. This was the April 12th list, and you can see Briggs Cheney is on there.
Yeah, I just want to make sure they didn't slide off.
No. I'm aware of that location and that they've been passionately involved in the cause, so they are on our list and will stay there.
Okay, and just from a technical standpoint, because we read the county code says the Department of Public Works makes the list in conjunction, or has the authority, in conjunction with the Chief of Police and the County Council, as opposed to the Chief of Police makes the list in conjunction.
I apologize.
Don't apologize. You have lawyers who are supposed to know this. It's in one hand, it's semantics. I mean, the administration is going to do what the administration does, but the important thing is that the County Council weighs in and approves the list. So I think, speaking for myself, anxiously awaiting for the list. What's today? February? Oh, we're coming up on 2 years from that letter. So okay. So how soon do you think you say it's a 90-day process? How soon do you think you'll have the list?
Well, within that 90 days, obviously, because we want the first cameras that come online to go into residential areas. So there's our goal is to get you that list of at least an initial sites. Hopefully a few more sites than are on that one we used back in April. But we want that goal, we want those sites through and approval so that right when the cameras are ready to be deployed, they could go right into those zones.
Great, looking forward to it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Fisher?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I was interested in Councilmember Harrison's line of questioning. I'm very confused about the contract that was used in this case. When the police department, when you all select a contract such as this, do you go through the same process that the county goes for any contract for the county?
And again, I'm not an expert in procurement, but yes, I believe it is the same, meaning we have to make sure we comply with competitive procurement laws. What I was told is the main mechanism that happens is by forming a policy analysis group, publishing a request for proposals, soliciting bids, and then approving those bids. We looked for an accelerated way to comply with competitive procurement by trying to find a vendor that had a cooperative purchasing award or that the county is a participant in. So we were under the impression that would be a valid way to source a contract without going through because through the cooperative purchasing line agreement, if the county is a member of that, then those are valid contract sources.
Right, I just don't think it's, one, I was looking at the company and I know that it's Florida-based, and you had a nomination or bid for Prince George's case company, and I don't see, do you have, so right now they have all their paperwork done that they're a Maryland licensed business right now?
Yeah, and again, OMB helped us get this contract. As far as we know, they're fully licensed and entitled to.
And what time would they be on the contract getting on board? Will you have a gap in service by the time they come on?
Unfortunately, we are anticipating there to be a gap because it took us this amount of time to get a new contract in place, and because the conduit contract was set to expire in February, in a few days now, our only choice was either to extend conduit, which automated enforcement was strongly against, because every day that conduit runs can complicate the transition process, because every citation that's being issued during that time has to get transitioned over.
So how long is the gap?
We're hoping to keep it within 90 days. We're hoping that within 90 days from January the 18th, we have new cameras out and we have coverage back. But because conduit will stop on February the 26th, there will be a potential gap.
I would say, Mr. Chair, this is not a question, this is more of a comment. I know that this council is very committed to Prince George's County-based businesses, and I find it really disappointing that we use a German Florida company for a speed contract and not a Prince George's County-based business to do our speed contracting that bid. And I think they even sent a letter of I forgot what the legal term is now, but they sent a letter, I think through a law firm, basically saying that it wasn't a fair process and kind of against whatever happened in your bid process. So I don't for this contract, I really think we need to take a really hard look about why this random Florida-based company or German-based company, I don't know what it is getting this contract versus everyone else that may be applied, especially a Prince George's County-based business. So I have to say that, I'm disappointed to hear that, and, I don't think colleagues would be getting that information if everything happened was every I was dotted and T was crossed in an appropriate fashion. So I think we should look into that.
I'm sorry, this is news to me. I don't even know what companies, I'd like to know what companies we're talking about. This is all news to me. We got a letter? I have not seen a letter. But one thing I want to make sure is we don't delay this thing more. Which we don't want, if there's a challenge to the bid or something that could end up delaying potentially, which we cannot have.
And not to speak, but may I?
Please.
a large part of our determination was because we, to give some historical context, when the conduit contract, which is our current outgoing vendor, that was awarded in 2019 as a result of an RFP process that began in 2016.
Okay.
So that we were afraid that obviously we looked at options to competitively procure a contract that maybe that we could do in a more accelerated time frame, because we were in a critical state. The state of the program, we didn't think we could afford to necessarily go through the full process of forming a PAG and forming it. We took the initial steps to do that, but we were told on advice that we could source a contract from a company that had been given a competitive purchasing award. Through an organization. This one was Omnia Partners, but there's others that the county's they're signatories to, and contracts have been sourced through before, like AHGAC Buy is another one. We were told that that was a valid way to source a contract and that it could be done quickly, because essentially those contracts are competitively bid and the award is given by the group, and any member of that group can source a contract from that. So that was the primary reason why we went with this company, is because between the two companies, one of them had one of these cooperative purchasing awards we could use and the other did not. And
Can you break it down for us? Explain what a competitive purchasing award is.
And again, I'm not an expert on this, so I can give you how I understand them. Government procurement is a complex thing for many governments. And so there are organizations where governments, all with these same kind of constraints, get together in kind of a cooperative and establish an entity that has competitive purchasing rules that satisfy each of the constituent government's rules. They then prepare RFPs, like requests for proposals, for certain types of government services and broadcast them out there, and companies can bid against those RFPs. If that organization awards a contract to one of those companies for one of their solicited bids, that contract allegedly satisfies the it has been competitively procured because the bidding process was satisfied by that cooperative purchasing group. That's what I was made to understand.
So, Mr. Duggan wants to know the name of the company that was awarded.
Genoptic.
Okay.
And the local company is.
And I assume, does that go through OCS?
Yes.
Okay, so hold on. So this has already been awarded, is that correct?
Yes.
And the program, we're here to be briefed on
Yes.
the program, when cameras are finally going to be put in. I understand there are questions about the bidding, which is valid, and we can ask those questions. But it sounds like that may be an OCS question as well. I don't know, Ms. Skinner, do you have anything to add?
I can tell you that OCS was and is involved in this, the vendor selection process and all that. But to your point, my understanding in having Mr. Smith here was for the briefing of the program.
Right.
Absolutely. If there are additional questions, which it sounds like there are, I'd be
Right.
happy to deliver that to OCS and DCO Stanton and Mr. McCarthy and get you guys those answers.
I think we would like all those answers from OCS
Yes,
and
absolutely.
whoever
And
else.
we can provide follow-up information as well to you all also.
Please, thank you. Okay, were you done, Ms. Fisher? Okay, Mr. Hawkins.
Mr. Chair, you already kind of alluded to it, because yesterday, Councilmember Delegate Valorama has a bill dealing with increasing the fines for these speed cameras, specifically on Maryland Route 210. And Captain Smith was there, as well as Pamela Dickerson from Central Services. And what I was going to recommend to you, she and Captain Smith did a very extraordinary job informing the citizens on Maryland 210 corridor about how we got to the new contract, why we there. And just so you all know, the citizens on the 210 corridor was grateful to hear about the transition of the new cameras, because of some of the challenges with capturing data on 210. And Captain Smith has been very responsive to Councilmember Ed Barrows, and Mr. Barrows is here to speak for himself about getting them the information. And we almost had a mutiny about these cameras and they're, well, anyway, I would suggest to you to bring in Central Services to give you, and they will be able to answer some of the questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Hawkins. Are there any other questions? Mr. Burrows?
Why is 210 so special?
Because they have the most deaths.
well, he didn't say that on mic.
They have the most deaths in the state of Maryland from crashes and speeding.
Mr. Burrows?
It's taken a lot out of me not to address that, because South County is often treated as a stepchild of this county government, Mr. Denoga.
Oh, okay.
I just wanted to say that I'm happy that you're moving to a different, all of this about the different vendors, new information to me. I was unaware that there was a county company and whatever the discrepancy is. I don't know anything about that, but what I can say is that we're very happy down in Fort Washington, as Mr. Hawkins said, that we're moving to a different vendor, one that's going to be more responsive, because so many people speed all throughout the county, and the last vendor was not properly holding those individuals accountable. And so if this company will do that, I'm sure that the residents in Fort Washington will let you know either way, because we're actively monitoring it. So I think that moving to a different vendor is a great idea. And of course, I support any Prince George's County-based business, but we also want to make sure that we are properly putting forth whatever mechanisms we can to control speeding. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burrows. Yes, Chair Ivy.
Just point of clarification. I wanted to know when will this 90-day period of people, no service from speed camera enforcement be?
I don't know if we want to say it.
Send me a text.
Get back to us on that.
Yeah, true. I get
Yeah.
that. But I am very concerned about not having them work for any period of time.
Correct.
And if there's something we can do in the interim so that there isn't a gap in service, I think we need to work towards that.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay. I have, okay. Yes, Mr. Stanton, great to have you with us.
Good morning, everyone. I want to just come down from my office, one, to talk about the contract. One, we've got a protest. So I came to just say that until the protest is resolved, we want to make sure we're careful on how we resolve that particular issue. So I felt it was important that I come down from my office and to clarify to the council that we are in the middle of a protest and try to resolve that. Two, I feel very comfortable where we are on the contractor right now. I feel there was a clear process on how we got to that particular point. Two, Councilman Hawkins is correct. As Councilman Barrows know, we had a lot of problems on 210 that we wanted to try to address. The quickest way to address it without going through a total bid process was to look at either a rider or a cooperative agreement. We looked at those processes. We're resolving it with that process, but I want to be careful until the protest is resolved one way or the other before we comment any further. I feel very comfortable where we are with this process. As far as continuing service, as far as I'm concerned, Conduit continues with the service under the police department and continue to track traffic citations until this transition is complete. So any questions from me before I leave? Yes.
Ms. Fisher.
It's always so good to see you, Mr. Sand. Thank you for coming down here. And I don't know anything about procurement to the point that you know, but I would say, what is the overall county's position? Not on the case, because protest was the word and I was lost for it when I was saying I know there's a legal issue going on with it. What is our commitment, though, in general, to county-based businesses when they're going for anything? Right? And what do we do to help ensure their success? Because we want our dollar, at least I can't speak to other District 2 wants the county dollar to rotate in the county, right? If we talk about different communities, I forgot what, there's certain communities where their dollar in their community rotates 7 times and create wealth, and in other particular communities it goes out. It's just once. So not even just this contract, what are we doing for county-based businesses to get county contracts?
Well, let me just say from my point of view, while I don't oversee central services, I think the issue is we want to honor county contracts. We want to work with county local contractors. That's always been my place since I've been in this county. Even when I was in the school system under Councilman Burrows, we worked on some things on that particular. So I don't see that changing. I think what the issue is, because there's a protest, there's a number of issues that's not clear. I feel very comfortable where we are and what I know with what happened. I'm not going to get into those details, but there was a clear process, and Central Services is going to handle that. But that's not going to take away from honoring contracts locally, minority-based contracts, female contracts. Those kind of contracts are going to be honored. This was a different type of process that was overseen by Central Services for a number of reasons, and I feel very comfortable with the way we resolved it. So hopefully the protests have resolved any concerns any contractor has at this particular point.
Okay. Mr. Harrison, Vice Chair Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Stanton, thank you for coming down and clarifying. Just listening to, the reason why the question came up, honestly, is because it was in part of the briefing this morning. So when I saw it, wanted to be able to get some sort of background on it.
Right.
The questions I have, in the selection process would have been, is it an infrastructure problem based upon technology compared to what the other vendor is? What is that challenge? And number two is, when the captain was talking about this is a company that does this around the world, does this all over the states, then comes into question in my mind, well, you got one company controlling everything, creating a monopoly where the smaller companies can't even compete. So that's what gave me pause. Yeah. So that's what my line of questioning.
Let me elaborate on that. The issue is, as far as the company itself, it's in the United States. It has businesses in Delaware and Florida. That's one. Two, it's dealt with a number of organizations across the United States of America, including the city of New York. I won't get into the separations of differences in why this vendor was selected. There's a number of reasons, which is very detailed, and I won't get into that. Differences between this company and this company. There was 3 companies, not just 2. So I just want to make it clear. And I felt under this process, we needed to have 3 companies, at least 3, to have a clear process. And all 3 is presented to the Police Department, the Revenue Authority, and DPWT. And there was a recommendation made. And so at the end of the day, I just want to be careful on what the process was, because there's a number of things running around on this particular issue. And I know the answer, but I'm not going to get in it because Central Services is responsible for doing their job, not Barry Stanton.
Right.
And so I'm comfortable where we are at this point.
And I want to thank you for your honesty, Mr. Stanton, for even coming down to explain it. That was very informative, what you gave us. It's just when it came up, part of the briefing, that's how this line of questionings came up.
That's why I came down to follow
I know
Captain,
you can't say anything.
Captain Smith.
There's a protest going on about this right now, so you're very limited in what you can say as well. But I do believe that hopefully things can get worked out.
Yes.
Okay.
I feel comfortable with that. So
Thank you.
I felt I needed to come down and clarify since Captain
You're
Smith
welcome
was out
anytime.
there.
You're welcome anytime,
Thank you all
Mr.
very
Stanton.
much, unless you need me any farther.
You don't go too far.
Thank you.
I have a question. About the actual implementation of this, which is, are these the only quarters? These, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 or 12? Are these the only ones at this time?
No, this was an initial list that we prepared back in early 2022 when we had ambitions to start expanding residential broadly.
Okay.
This was the first list we published, and again, published this list, started deploying the first ones at Ritchie Marlboro, and slowly started to learn that so
there's more that we are going to see as the council to approve.
Oh, certainly, absolutely.
To include Princess Garden Parkway.
Yeah, this was just the
Okay.
initial list that we developed before we started to learn that we
Great.
were not going to be able to proceed.
Thank you very much. We look forward to seeing that as soon as possible. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn? There's a motion. Is there a second? Mr. Vice Chair Harrison, seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, please raise your hand if we want to adjourn. We are adjourned.